Goedemiddag iedereen en welkom bij de eerste EdUtalk van 2022. Die wordt georganiseerd door het Departement Onderwijs en Vorming in samenwerking met VLEVA. Helaas, wegens de coronamaatregelen is het nog altijd een online sessie. Vandaag gaat het gaan over de nieuwe Europese initiatieven in het volwassenenonderwijs. Onze sprekers komen vanuit het Sloveense voorzitterschap en de commissie en spreken Engels en daarom ga ik ook overschakelen naar het Engels. Before we start, let me briefly introduce myself and go over the house rules. So my name is Wouter Kerkhove. I'm the attaché at the Flemish representation with the EU and also at the Department of Education and Training, and I'm your moderator for today. This webinar is organized by GoToWebinar. Participants can unmute. Asking questions is possible, but only through the question box in the control panel. Please always mention your organization. We will try to answer as much as possible of the questions submitted in advance and those asked live today, as they will be addressed during the Q&A. But first, as we have many speakers today, I think let's go through the program directly. The welcoming word will be given by Jeroen, who is the head of division of the Strategic Policy Unit at the department, and that unit is also managing the European coordination. So Jeroen, it's up to you.
Thank you very much, Wouter, and dear colleagues, my best wishes to you all for the new year and a warm welcome on my behalf and on behalf of the Flemish Education Department for this first EdUtalk of 2022, which will be about a very interesting topic of lifelong learning and more specific adult education. Now, lifelong learning is among the driving forces of our social and economic progress. It contributes to people's employability and professional growth, as well as their personal development and well-being. And continuous learning can also help us to face important challenges, of course, including the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic and the shift towards a digital and environmentally sustainable European society. It is clear that adult learning is an important key for the future of Europe, especially in the light of the green and digital transitions and related skills needs. And in the current context, adult skills and qualifications are of high importance, and accessibility and flexibility in our adult education systems adapted to the needs of adults are therefore mandatory principles when rethinking our adult education system. Now, in this context, the renewed European Agenda for Adult Learning has been adopted by the Council of Ministers at the end of November 2021. And that agenda wants to significantly increase adult participation in formal, non-formal, and informal learning. It outlines a vision on how adult learning should develop in Europe by 2030, and the importance of quality, equity, inclusion, and success in adult learning, including the professional development of the adult learning staff and active support to disadvantaged groups is emphasized throughout this ambitious agenda. Now, I could get into this and describe the 5 axes on which this agenda has been built, but we have here Mrs. Jasmina Poličnik, Secretary at the Directorate for Upper Secondary Short Cycle Higher Vocational and Adult Education, and currently a member of the Slovenian Presidency of the Council of the European Union, here with us. And I'm sure she will give a much more profound presentation of the European agenda than I could ever bring, and I wish to thank her for that. I would also like to thank William O'Keefe and Klara Engels-Perenyi from DG Employment for their work and presentations on micro-credentials and learning accounts. The flexible nature of these learning opportunities allow people who work full-time to participate in education. And this makes micro-credentials a very flexible and inclusive form of learning, which can provide specific skills and competences. And this way, people who want to expand their knowledge without having to complete a full higher education program or want to undertake further training or retraining to meet the needs of the labor market to enhance their professional development can more easily access education as well. And in Flanders too, there is a strong focus on the acquisition of basic skills and professional competences and on the validation and recognition of competences acquired elsewhere. Now, adult education is, of course, not only a priority on the European agenda, it's also an important element in the Flemish recovery plan. And with the strategic plan EduSprong, Education Leap for Adults, Adult Education Strengthened, The Flemish adult education will be given a boost. Flanders has earmarked 60 million euros for training and retraining and service training that will help both to eliminate the backlog in adult education caused by this health crisis and address other structural challenges. And the main elements of the plan are strengthening digital competences, tackling unqualified young people, and strengthening labor market opportunities. And I'm very pleased our colleague from the Flemish Education Department, Vicky van Rijsselveld, is here to give us an insight in the EdUtalks plan. I'll end my introduction by thanking Wouter Kerkhove and Sanne Noël of the Strategic Policy Division of the Flemish Education Department for organizing this event. And of course, a big thank you towards our co-organizer of this EdUtalks, VLEVA, for their support to bring the ideas and spirits of European cooperation towards the Flemish education sector. Thank you once again to all participants and speakers, and I look forward to the discussion, and I wish you a very inspiring first EdUtalk of the year.
Thank you, Jeroen, for this nice introduction. And then let's go immediately to the second part. And let me introduce you our colleague from the former Slovenian presidency, but still Jasmina Poličnik. She works at the Ministry of the Slovenian Ministry at the Secretary at the Directorate for Upper Secondary Short Cycle Higher Vocational and Adult Education Directorate. But more importantly, she was the driving force in the Slovenian presidency for getting this resolution approved, and she has given us in the Education Committee many inspiring talks and information, and she was really forced relentlessly to get this new European agenda for adult learning approved, and we are very happy that she's here because there's no person better placed to explain and give us a short introduction of this agenda. Thank you, Jasmina, and the floor is to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Wouter, for this kind introduction and flattery, may I add. So, dear colleagues, good afternoon also from my side, and a warm welcome from the sunny Slovenia. I'm honored to have the possibility to speak a little about adult learning today. I would like also to thank the Belgian representation to the EU and VLEVA for this invitation. So, during the presidency of the Council of the European Union, Slovenia set out the 6-month program under the slogan Together Resilient Europe. Slovenia's main priorities were the Union's resilience to crisis, the debate on the EU strategic autonomy, and the recovery of the European economy based on the digital and green transition. Accordingly, we set knowledge and skills, greening, and digital transformation as overarching priority areas within also education and training. Amongst the other successfully realized priorities is also the Council resolution on a new European agenda for adult learning by 2030. I will refer it as NEIL further on. The process and the preparation period started in the last February, covering diverse activities which sometimes overlapped but always supported each other. So I would point out 3 key activities. First is designing a background document based on achievements report of the ET 2020 Adult Learning Group, which was guiding all further discussions with member states, European stakeholders and social partners, and also with the European Commission. The second one is the exploratory opinion prepared by the European Economic and Social Committee on Adult Learning by the request of the Slovenian presidency, which is reflecting social partners' view and recommendations on adult learning. It was published in June and it's accessible in their website. And the third activity is the organizing of dual conference by Slovenian presidency and the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning. And the main output of this conference is the Declaration on Adult Learning and Education by 2030. As such, the document concluded the discussions of the conference and is a clear commitment and advocacy action of AL professionals involved in policy making, development and implementation of AL in Europe for the next decade. I will tell you a little bit more after these few slides. So the final version of NEIL was adopted on Education, Youth, Culture, Sport Council on 29th of November. The education policy should enable all citizens to reach their full potential. So the full potential in their competencies in the context of the lifelong learning. This is a key message of many European Commission initiatives and documents already adopted by member states in the framework of the Council of Ministers for Education. This resulted in all 5 topics here mentioned and are cross-matching in all 3 documents. So with the green and digital transition, the governance and partnerships, strengthening the quality and ARGO, which is meant awareness raising, guidance and outreach, inclusion and equity, and lifelong learning culture. The aim of our future work in adult learning is to increase and improve the high quality provision of adult learning opportunities, supporting by awareness raising, guidance and outreach activities. Whether it is formal, non-formal or informal learning, there should be open access to all learners. We also paid special attention to strengthening the key competencies of adults and the appropriate development of vocational and professional education. We highlighted the role of work-based environments together with the appropriate training of professionals and the provisions of technological and digital support. Achieving sustainable goals via digital and green transition is an important horizontal aspect as a key priority set in all 3 documents. So I will not go in depth with explaining the exploratory opinion of EESC and the declaration which I mentioned before, but just to give you some hints. By the exploratory opinion of EEC it's also included suggestions of the social partners, which is to be straightened policy through a holistic approach and improve accessibility, quality, and inclusiveness. They also think that considering effective lifelong strategies needs to meet new skills requirements, and that lifelong learning should become a way of life for all. They also supported the 60% target of adult learning participation per year by addressing skills mismatches and enhancing governance and financing for adult learning, including employee training. The EESC also emphasized the need for member states to step up their efforts to improve the quality of adult education and teaching. So the also mentioned conference was organized in cooperation with European Commission and UNESCO as the adult learning and education as the resilient response for future challenges. It was organized in September, and it also engaged 450 participants from 39 countries, also outside of the EU. Why is this important? Because the participants of this event also contributed a lot in the main output, so the declaration itself. It has integrated 8 building blocks as in 8 different priority areas, and it's considered as a commitment of the professional communities and how to build a learning culture to boost adult learning and education. It's also advocating and supporting a professional commitment and advocacy action of AIR to complement the NIL. So the declaration is also accessible on the webpage of the conference, and it's also including all 8 building blocks. So if we go further, I need to clarify something about the background of preparing this document. So the reasoning behind the NIL is really extensive. Council resolution on a renewed European agenda for adult learning from 2011, placed in ET 2020 framework, has expired. Also, new package of documents adopted by the European Commission in the period of 2019 to 2021 for the next period by 2030. And the third main reason is also the Council of European Union adopted the strategic framework for European cooperation in education towards EEA and beyond to arrange education policy area, also including adult learning and education. So Slovenian presidency took over the activities to prepare the Council resolution of NIL as a result of this current situation, with the vision to improve European policy actions for adult learning and education. NEEL is currently published on the website of the Council of the EU. Please check the link on the slide. The structure of NEEL includes background and relevant documents, circumstances and positioning of adult learning, agreement on the aim of NEEL, invitations to action for European Commission and Member States, priority areas clearly described, and targets and indicators. I would point out one of EU-level target was agreed among Member States, and also it was agreed to achieve it in two-step process. First step is reaching by 2025 at least 47% of adults to participate in learning during the last 12 months. The second step is reaching by 2030 at least 60% of adults to participate in learning. Given that the data source is planned to be changed in 2022 from the Adult Education Survey to the EU Labour Force Survey, the target is subject to confirmation in 2023 on the basis of experience of the new data source. The Commission will evaluate the impact of these changes by comparing the results of the Adult Education Survey and Labour Force Survey in 2023 and consider possible changes to the methodology or to the level of the target. So going a little bit up, NEEL emphasizes key common agreements when talking about adult learning by 2030. So EU needs a new learning culture within formal, non-formal and informal learning contexts throughout one's life. Adult learning has a special place within the strategic framework for European cooperation towards reaching the European education area due to the challenges of recovery from COVID-19 crisis and the need for resilience. The existing fragmentation of adult learning between sectors, policy areas, and legal frameworks needs to be addressed. The need of incentivizing employers to take a more active role in supporting upskilling and reskilling is important. Adult learning needs to go beyond the development of only work-related skills. Adult learning has the power to enhance life and work opportunities for adults, regardless of their socio-demographic and personal circumstances. Last but not least, the impacts of the demographic change require new approaches to facilitate the participation of adults, including those not inclined to attend learning activities and the 65+ year age group. So in the period by 2030, the overall objective in Europe will be to increase and improve the provision, promotion, and take-up of formal, non-formal, and informal learning opportunities for all. Adult learning can contribute to active citizenship and community learning. It also supports personal, social, and professional development and fulfillment, health, and well-being, in accordance with the individual's current and future needs, talents, and aspirations. Adult learning plays a crucial part in responding to current and future challenges and opportunities in life and at work. So what are the priorities of NEEL? 1, governance. The second, supply and take-up of lifelong learning opportunities, accessibility and flexibility, quality, equity, inclusion, and success in adult learning is the fourth one, and green and digital transitions as the last one. Those priority areas ensure continuity of the work and further development of adult learning on the areas of already mentioned. NEEL underlines that adult learning needs a holistic, intersectoral approach through effective coordination at European, national, regional, and local levels, respecting the diverse national models. NEEL also defines tools to be used while implementing the priorities: open method of coordination, mutual learning, effective governance through EU-level targets and indicators, knowledge building and evidence-based adult learning policy, cooperation with international organizations, and funding. Regarding the priorities of NEEL, new priority was added. Green and digital transitions and priority on governance was emphasized. So those two priority areas were additionally added in regards to the already expired agenda for adult learning. If we go into depth with what needs to be done by the European Commission, Through the NIL, we invited European Commission to focus their efforts over the next period on the priorities areas mentioned, and where relevant, in accordance with national, regional, and local contexts, circumstances, and legislation. We did invite EC to enhance effective liaison between the relevant ministries, as well as the stakeholders, with a view to improve coherence between policies on adult learning. And we invite EC to support adult learning with lifelong guidance and career development by building partnerships at all levels. And in implementing the Council recommendation on the validation of non-formal and informal learning. Last but not least, in this section, we invited EC to support expanding adult learning at the secondary and tertiary level, both general and vocational, for flexible learning pathways. Some other invitations were clearly stated. So to raise the occupational status and support the professionalization of adult educators and trainers. So this is something that really came up from the report of the previous agenda, that the status of the educators needs to be specially addressed. We also invited European Commission to support high quality and inclusion-driven digitalization of education. And we also invited to strive to develop simple, flexible, and broad mechanisms for companies and individuals to raise awareness and foster a change in mindset. With that in mind, I'm really welcoming today's presentation of Klara and William on the micro-credentials and individual learning accounts. Going further, with NIL, we also invited EC to facilitate lifelong learning to promote participation of adults in learning through a variety of different instruments, such as EPALE. Last but not least, we also invited to promote the learning mobility of adult learners and adult educators, as well as cooperation across borders through EU mechanisms. And with that said, we did not forget the development of the quality assurance mechanisms. Regarding the member states' invitations, we said that the role of member states is clearly to give more efforts and to focus their efforts on the priority, all agreed priorities. And going further, we also specifically pointed out that we wanted that member states should support adult learning with lifelong guidance and career development, and the implementation of the Council recommendation on the validation of the non-formal and informal learning. We also see the role of the member states in supporting expanding adult learning at the secondary and tertiary level. And going further, we also see the role in the raising the occupational status and support to the professionalization, and the support high quality and inclusion-driven digitalization of the education, and also other invitations which are clearly very related to those to the EC regarding the micro-credentials, individual learning accounts, also to lifelong learning to promote the participation of adults, and also the quality assurance aspect. So with that said, I would say that NIL gives us and defines a very ambitious goals, but it also encourages on adult learning to provide the necessary conditions for people to be agents of change through the choices they make. Individuals with a developed lifelong learning mindset are better equipped to adapt to new circumstances and to develop skills they need for jobs, as well as for full participation in society and personal development. As such, adult learning can fulfill its potential to transform lives and societies. So thank you for your attention, and I'm open up for any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jasmina. I think you gave us really the overview, the big agenda in which we were going to work on the European level for the coming 10 years. And I think that's really interesting. I absolutely note that we have this a very ambitious target of 47% by 2025 to 60% by 2030. And of course, the new topics of governance and the green digital skills, who are now really the new things also for adult learning, and important as well, I think what you said, agents of change. And for that, we go from this meta framework, we're going to go now to two specific teams, which will be introduced by speakers from the European Commission. So it's my pleasure to welcome Klara Engels-Perenyi and William O'Keefe. Klara is the policy officer at DG Employment, I think at the Skills Agenda unit, and William is at the VET unit, or might be vice versa, but I think I'm right. I'm very happy also, William's already on screen, we have Klara there. William and I go way back. We used to do the same job, but in different member states, so it's a very pleasure to have you here. He also worked on the Europass initiative, and Klara is the coordinator of the adult network, the adult coordinating network, and the national coordinators. So they're perfectly placed to introduce us the topics. William will introduce micro-credentials, and Klara will introduce the individual learning accounts. Just for everybody to know, the Commission published them in December last year, and they will be now up for negotiation by the Council working parties. The micro-credentials will be dealt with in the Education Committee, and the individual learning account will be dealt with our colleagues from the social questions. But I'll give the floor to William. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wouter. Happy New Year. I hope you can hear me okay. Thank you very much for the invitation to, sorry about that. Thank you very much for the invitation to this first EdUtalk event. Like you said, I'm going to take you through the recently adopted proposal for a council recommendation on a European approach to micro-credentials for lifelong learning and employability. So why has the Commission taken action on this topic of micro-credentials? Basically, the term micro-credentials is a relatively new term, only appeared as a Google search term as recently as 2013. But what has been clear is that with the advent of COVID-19 and the shift to online learning, and of course the increased digitalization of learning that's happened more recently, and the fact that people need to access relevant and flexible ways to upskill and reskill in line with the demands of the changing job markets and the digital and green transition, people have been increasingly looking for ways to develop their skills online, to find learning opportunities online. When it comes to micro-credentials, they are by their nature short, targeted learning opportunities. The certification that's issued following these short targeted learning opportunities. Their benefits are that they are targeted and relevant. They're designed for a specific need. They can be small volume, short in duration, and ultimately have an inbuilt, they're flexible by nature so that they can fit with how people live, learn, and work today. So what was the rationale or the need for a proposal in this area? Even though there's been exponential growth in the area of micro-credentials over the last number of years, really hundreds of percent of growth in the uptake, in particular during the last 2 to 3 years. But ultimately, there are many open questions about this idea of micro-credentials. There is no one common definition. There's no basis for trust of micro-credentials that an employer or an education and training institution could confidently receive a micro-credential and could understand it and give recognition to it. There's a lack of transparency. There are different ways and formats and tools for describing and understanding micro-credentials, so that it's not easy to compare and understand micro-credentials when they move between countries or companies or providers. And then ultimately there's a lack of uptake, which is limiting the potential. Of course, adult learners aren't going to invest time and money in these micro-credentials to the scale that that we would like to see if there are all these preceding questions and areas of doubt. So with the Commission proposal, I just want to set out the scope for this, because the proposal in a way is coming at a time where there's lots of interest in micro-credentials, but lots and lots of open questions. So we want to be very clear from the outset that the Commission proposal aims to establish that micro-credentials can be used to complement and enhance existing education, training, lifelong learning and employability ecosystems. This is not about seeking to replace or disrupt existing systems or qualifications. It's about enabling lifelong learning and the fact that you do need to access other ways and opportunities to learn throughout life after initial education and after maybe you've completed traditional qualifications. And of course, within this, we want to emphasize in the third bullet that we are addressing something that's ongoing and that's well underway. There are huge numbers of education and training organizations, employers, social partners, and private providers who are very active in this area of micro-credentials. So importantly, the proposal doesn't establish any new type of systems or agencies or governance or anything like that. It's about putting in place building blocks that can help bring more coherence to this, developing area of micro-credentials. So the proposal, as Wouter mentioned, that was published last December, adopted by the Commission last December, this is the outline of it that you see on screen. We put in place building blocks so that essentially we have a clear starting point to understand what are we talking about when we talk about micro-credentials. The proposal sets out a common definition for micro-credentials, standard elements for describing micro-credentials, and principles for designing and issuing micro-credentials. Now, I won't go into the detail of each of these today, but I've included them in slides that will be included in the slides to be circulated afterwards. And of course, they're in the text of the proposal themselves. But based on our consultation, our wide consultation over the last 18 months, it became very clear that these were the elements, these building blocks that stakeholders thought would have more value, most value, and could contribute to developing the potential and the currency of micro-credentials. So these elements are in place, and like Wouter has mentioned, the negotiation and the discussion on this proposal will begin in the Education Committee this year. But these elements that we've put in place, as I say, are based on a very thorough consultation with a wide range of stakeholders across the member states from both education, training, and employment settings. In the middle column there, you'll see that there's also sets of recommendations to the member states and to the Commission itself on how to firstly develop ecosystems that are ready and able and open to developing and designing micro-credentials, and then suggestions of different ways in which you can deliver on the potential of micro-credentials. And on the third column, you'll see there an important point to emphasize is the focus of this, that micro-credentials are tools for lifelong learning, and therefore the recommendations and the substance of the recommendation, it addresses education, training and skills policies, and equally active labour market policies that we address the stakeholders and the organisations and the actors within each of these sectors in the member states, and to try and really demonstrate and highlight that they have a role in delivering on the potential of micro-credentials and can use them as part of their work to support upskilling and reskilling. With the recommendations to the member states, it's put out quite simply and coherently with recommendations to adopt the definition, adopt the standard elements, and adopt the principles for designing and issuing. But of course, these elements and building blocks are written in an open, universal way because they need to be, of course, adapted and used in diverse national systems in line with national priorities. And then we recommend to the member states to put in place, the building blocks and develop their ecosystems for micro-credentials at national level, work to deliver on the potential, and then to take steps to implement the recommendation itself using financial resources and other resources as necessary, and also making best use of union financing. When it comes to the ecosystems, again, I won't go into excessive detail. It is all in the proposal, but as I say, we try to be open and universal. So when we say developing your ecosystems, we mean to look at and reflect on formal, non-formal and informal learning settings, and looking at the national systems that are very often already in place, including those that relate to quality assurance, skills intelligence, catalogues and information on learning opportunities, your national qualifications framework, and looking at how these may need to be adapted or updated for the potential of micro-credentials. All those tools are already in place and have the capability of describing learning achievements and can potentially be used now for the purposes of micro-credentials. With regard to formal learning, we comprehensively refer to higher education institutions and VET and continuous and adult providers, that they all have a role in supporting the development of micro-credentials. And there in the middle column, again, we want to be comprehensive, so we explicitly include mention of employers, social partners, civil society organizations, and the role for social dialogue, in really being quite explicit in saying that all of these stakeholders have a role in bringing together the ecosystems that are necessary for delivering on micro-credentials. When it comes to then the delivering on the potential of micro-credentials, we give specific targeted recommendations and suggestions on use of micro-credentials in education, training, skills, and labour market settings, including using micro-credentials to support access and transitions, targeted activities around digital and green skills for teacher training, and in targeted ways to apply research and tackle issues around gender and other types of discrimination. Because again, the benefit of micro-credentials is that they can be developed and designed for very specific uses. And then in labour market settings, again, micro-credentials, if they're developed and designed based on up-to-date information and clear identification of needs, can be used to tackle new and emerging skills challenges and to upskill and reskill workers in line with demands in the labour market, as well as offering necessary support to target groups. And also we give a recommendation around using the micro-credentials for regulatory requirements, such as when it comes to issuing licenses and other types of training and permits. So of course, this is a long list. It aims to be comprehensive and illustrative and expansive and show the potential of micro-credentials, but of course it will be for the member states to decide if and how to use micro-credentials in line with the national priorities and circumstances at national level. The Commission, of course, will play a role in supporting the implementation of this proposal, the eventual recommendation, including exploring if it's necessary to develop and adapt existing tools. We have VET tools, higher education tools, credit systems. We can reflect with member states and stakeholders on if it's necessary to develop guidance and information on how to use these tools for the purposes of micro-credentials. We'll actively support cooperation between member states and stakeholders, again emphasising the need for cooperation between actors on both sides of the education, training and labour market bridges. We believe there'll be a key role for implementation of micro-credentials through Europass, including the ability to issue micro-credentials as digital credentials and enabling learners to find information on micro-credentials through the new Europass platform, and of course store information on Europass in their personal portfolios, their Europass e-portfolios. Finally, what's clear is that micro-credentials is still a new and emerging topic, and there's a lack of data. There is no information on micro-credentials currently collected in national surveys. So we've also commissioned that the Commission will explore further research and data collection around micro-credentials, because if we are to take forward micro-credentials and try and develop their impact and potential, we need to see what their true value is and what their impact is on upskilling and reskilling over time. So that's an overview of the building blocks. As I say, the building blocks are the definition, standard elements, and principles for design, and then the recommendations to the member states and the Commission on developing ecosystems for micro-credentials and then delivering on their potential in targeted ways. You'll see my email address on the slide, and of course these will be circulated afterwards, and I'll be happy to be contacted if you have any questions. Thank you.
So hello, can you see my screen already? No.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Yes, because I don't see the option of changing. Just a second. Yes, I think if everything goes well, you see the view the full screen. Yes, thank you very much, and thank you also for the invitation for your policy talk this afternoon. I would like to introduce you to the individual learning accounts proposal, which was presented by the Commission at the same time as micro-credentials, as just a few days after the adoption of the strategy for adult learning, what Jasmina presented, which was in the form of a council resolution. And our proposal on individual learning accounts is also very much reinforcing the micro-credentials recommendation and vice versa. So hopefully the two together will lead to more participation of adults in learning. And we also aimed at trying to ensure that the lifelong learning can be, and adult learning can be a norm instead of the exception, and that much more people will be able to participate in adult learning in the future. And this through providing financial support via individual learning accounts, which are embedded in an enabling environment, and through trusted training offers which are certified in a transparent way. And a little bit more details about that will follow in a second. I just would like to put also the proposal into the context of our current environment and how we see the world around us, the labor market. There are many people working in atypical forms of work. More and more people are changing jobs or are forced even to change jobs more frequently than before. There are differences yes, there are differences between sectors, and people from one sector which is less in demand might need to reskill to be able to work in other sectors which are more in demand, and it is very closely linked to the green and the digital transitions we are facing. Also, shifting skills needs put a challenge to people, and certainly the demographic changes which are there in many societies in most of countries in the EU, but even worldwide. There are demographic trends which require that that people are able to adapt more, and in order to fill other skills needs than before, and change their jobs. And these are processes which make all working age adults vulnerable, and require a policy reinforced policy on skills. There are different initiatives of the Commission as well, but even more probably at national level, to react on these challenges. And one of them is individual learning accounts. And this will not solve all the problems, and it will also not make, for example, training which is offered by employers not needed anymore, but it will be when implemented, hopefully in many member states. It will add to the possibilities of people, and probably fill the current gaps of provision which are there. Because there are gaps, we see that On the one hand, participation of adults in lifelong learning is low. Only 6 countries met the targets which was set for 2020, and we also see that a substantial number of companies have difficulties finding people with the right skills, and also very often the job-related training is sponsored by the current employer, and people who are not linked to an employer, they are not able to follow these trainings. And at the same time, people are also not that motivated to train throughout their lives. 80% of people asked in a dedicated survey said that they did not want to learn. So there are different layers of challenges, financial, but also motivational challenges, and the availability of courses which could make people convinced that they have an interest in following these. The proposal for individual learning accounts will support member states' reforms to enable more adults to engage in training, including for professional transitions, and irrespective of whether they are working or not. And they will also, this proposal wants to work also on the motivation and incentives of people to learn by making them, putting them into the driving seat for decide, more in the driving seat to decide about their learning. And this proposal is should also cover all working age adults legally residing in a member state, so not only a fragment of them. And this leads me to the basic principles which are behind the proposal. So in the center there would be the account itself, an account for everybody, which would be put in place through the national authorities or regional authorities, so through the public authorities of the country, and it would provide a universal entitlement for everybody, and if needed, for certain groups which are more in need of training, they would receive a higher support. From the impact assessment which was done before presenting the proposal, this was the this was the option which was the most likely to generate the desired result and also lead to the higher ambitions in reaching the target for participation in adult learning, which is not just a target for itself, but it reflects the reality of our societies now. Another important feature of individual learning accounts would be that these entitlements could be accumulated. They wouldn't have to be spent within 1 year, but that the individual could also decide to save entitlements over a few years and then spend them on a more expensive training instead of shorter trainings every year. And we would also suggest that these accounts are kept even if the person resides temporarily in another member state, so that this working mobility aspect remains possible, even without for shorter periods of being abroad. And these entitlements could be used also whether somebody is in the same employment or is in between jobs or wants to change jobs. So it's really up to the individual. It would be really up to the individual to see what kind of training he or she would like to follow. But of course, from a certain registry of training. But before going to that, I would like to emphasize once more that the fact who needs training the most is not only connected to the socioeconomic aspect or the skills level of the individual, but it can also be connected to the employment relationship, as I mentioned, whether they work in atypical forms or whether they work for an SME or micro enterprises. These persons should also have the same opportunity than employees of bigger enterprises to have access to training opportunities. And also the sector where they work could require certain bigger skills needs and training needs if they need to reskill for another job, for example, from the mining industry to other more upcoming sectors in the economy. And all this is really up to the national level. What is the situation in a certain country, and social partners and stakeholders would need to be consulted on deciding what would be the best parameters for setting up these individual learning accounts, and what kind of courses people would be able to learn. Because the accounts themselves wouldn't help too much to face the challenges which are related, for example, to the motivation of people. People would need also to see what kind of trainings they could follow, and here registries of quality assured and labor market relevant training opportunities would need to be put in place at the country where they live, and they would also need a single portal where they have access to information about their account, but also the learning opportunities, but also guidance and validation would have to be provided to them. Guidance to see to be able to see what training would best suit their training needs. And there is also another element which we included in this so-called enabling framework, that is the paid training leave, which exists in quite a number of countries, but only a very, very small percentage of people have access to this. And we propose to authorities to have a fresh look at the conditions by which paid training leave can be taken, and see whether this can be expanded. As I mentioned, implementation is very much depending on the situation in the different member states, and also from the depending on the starting point from where member states start. Countries where a voucher system is in place have already gone through a lot of steps which help the implementation of an individual learning account scheme, while other countries where even vouchers are not there could would need more time to put such a scheme in place, because as we see from the existing examples in certain countries like France or Singapore, it takes some years to put such a system in place, but on the midterm, it already pays off for the countries. Also, outreach and awareness raising would have to be part of the system, which is, as we heard from Jasmina, a general priority for adult learning as such. But certainly for such a scheme, it would have to be a very important element, and monitoring and continuous improvement of the scheme. The EU can support these developments through different funds, and we see that countries are expressing interest in spending on skills from the different EU funds which are available. So there is EU funding there, even an unprecedented amount of EU funding. So we hope that this can incentivize governments to think about the implementation of such a system. Currently, just today, the negotiations have started on the individual learning accounts in the social questions working party, and it will take some time. Hopefully, the negotiations will be concluded during this current French presidency, and then once adopted, member states would be required to look into implementation, for which they can use EU funds, and over 5 years there would be a first evaluation of the success of the proposal. Thank you very much, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about the Flemish plans and Flemish strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Klara, and thank you, William. Thanks a lot for this first introduction to those two very much relevant and timely proposals of the Commission, which are indeed this morning discussed during the Social Questions Working Party. Just for the Flemish audience, that means that my colleague from the Department of Work and Social Economy will be in the leads, and education will be in the lead also on micro-credentials. I'm looking forward to discussing definitely this definition, William. I've been there around. I know how fun it is to discuss a definition with 27 member states and building blocks, and of course the enabling framework for the ILA, which we will also, of course, from education look closely upon, because it has some links, of course, with the adult education and the offer existed. But now we first had, Jasmina, we had the meta framework, now we have two proposals, and now indeed it's time to look a bit to what we self are doing. You know, the Corona crisis has hit, of course, our education sector very hard. We have, our minister has implemented a relaunch strategy, which is partly funded for the digitalization and for the higher education by the RFF money. But then we also have a relaunch plan for adult education, which is the EdUtalks, which is funded by Flemish resources. And therefore, I'm very happy that I can introduce our own colleague from the department, Vicky, who worked previously at higher education, and I'm sorry, Vicky van Ruistenveld, I'm now forgetting the last name, sorry. First worked for higher education, but is now working on, of course, what we call in Dutch the EdUtalks. I think Vicky has a very nice English term for it, but she can say, and we're very thrilled that she will introduce this topic before we go to a panel where we try to mix all the topics together. Thank you, Vicky, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Wouter. I will share my presentation with you. Can everybody see this?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't see any reactions, so I think yes. Wouter, as you can see, I have not translated the title. I have called it Recovery Plan for Adult Education, but I'm keeping EduSprong as a title for now on. My name is Vicky van Ruisveld, and indeed I am working on the Ministry of Education and Training as a coordinator for this EduSprong plan, which is the Recovery Plan for Adult Education in Flanders. In the coming minutes, I will present to you this recovery plan, which shows several parallels to the new European agenda for adult learning. In general, EduSprong aims to strengthen adult education in Flanders in order to attract more adult learners and strengthen its regional embedding, as well as introducing innovations that give adult education a stronger labor market focus and a 21st century character. Flexibility, innovation, and sustainability are crucial factors in this recovery plan. To be able to realize this ambition, we focus on 4 focal points. First, adult education plays an important role in encouraging lifelong learning in Flanders. Second, strengthening labor market opportunities through upskilling and reskilling. Third, strengthening digital competences. And last, focusing on qualification and fighting early school leaving. In order to support the realization of these focal points, we have developed several types of actions, ranging from project calls for centers of adult education and centers for basic adult education, as well as some centralized actions. In this way, a central vision is developed in which local and tailor-made projects find their place. I will now clarify the focal points to you further. Yeah. Adult education wants to play an important role in encouraging lifelong learning. Flanders lacks a genuine lifelong learning culture and scores below average compared to other European education systems when considering the number of adults participating in education or training. In order to realize this ambition, we are developing a Flanders-wide promotion campaign, with which we will lay a solid foundation to profile adult education as a strong brand for lifelong learning in Flanders. The campaign will not only be aimed at potential learners, but also at the many organizations who can refer potential learners to adult education centers or basic adult education centers, as well as partners with which the centers can collaborate. In addition, a clear and easily accessible education compass will be developed in coordination with existing initiatives. On this website with the Education Compass, the up-to-date education offer of adult education will be presented. The online tool will also point potential learners in the right direction when determining their learning needs. But such a digital tool is not suitable for all target groups. To reach all adults and to guide them in their learning needs, an outreaching approach will be necessary. That is why we are also activating a strong regional cooperation of the centers with local partners that already take up the role of guidance and orientation for potential adult learners. This recovery plan has the ambition also to strengthen the adult education offer by tuning it even more to labor market needs, innovating it in order to give it a 21st century character and make it more flexible in order to fit the needs of a broad range of potential learners. As such, a further flexibilization and innovation of the education offer in form and in content is one of the main objectives of EduSprong. A first action that is already in full development is the region scan. This entails the local tailoring of the education offer in collaboration with a wide range of partners, and it is a key element of this recovery plan. Centers for adult education and centers for basic adult education were able to appoint staff with the EduSprong resources in order to analyze the labor market educational needs in their region. In this way, the recovery plan aims to stimulate the regional embedding of adult education. The region scan not only aims to adjust the education offer within the region towards local needs, but indirectly also enhances the fame of the field of adult education. After all, by contacting a wide range of partners, such as local businesses, non-profit partners, and organizations relating to specific target groups, in order to map these education needs, centers expanded their local networks. And partners who were not yet familiar with adult education now got acquainted with the broad range of education options in the field. Since September last year, 11 region teams are working on mapping education needs and are now very close to finish their work, which will be reported to us coming February 1st. Adult education will thus be able to respond more actively to local labor market needs by accelerating the development of a future-proof education offer, as well as the relating infrastructure, especially for vocational training. A far-reaching prior learning recognition policy is also given priority within EduSprong by way of the development of prior learning recognition instruments, as well as the guidance of candidates. Furthermore, a common framework for exemptions will be developed in close collaboration with the Centers of Adult Education. Finally, a collaborative project with the Examination Committee will be started. Here, adult learners can participate in exams and get their diploma for secondary education by self-study. The project will develop in function of mixed pathways between the Examination Committee and the Centers for Adult Education. Expanding flexible education options is also included in EduSprong. Centers get the possibility to develop different forms of hybrid learning where face-to-face, distance, and workplace learning are combined. Also, the focus on integrated trajectories in which vocational training can be partially combined with learning Dutch, especially for learners of Dutch as a second language, and both illiterate and low literate learners, should lead to a more flexible and differentiated education offer in adult education. Coming to the third focal point of strengthening digital competences. Adult education wants to play an important role in strengthening the digital competences of all Flemish people. A tailor-made education offer of digital skills will be developed for employees who will continue to telework in the future. Teachers in particular are an important target group in this regard. For example, efforts will be made to provide a suitable offer for teachers who wish to strengthen their digital competences in function of distance learning and digital evaluation. An ICT offer is also being developed for vulnerable groups in order to stimulate digital literacy. Those who do not have sufficient digital skills should be able to acquire them in adult education. The digital culture within the centers will also be strengthened with a renewal and expansion of the open learning centers, which are specially equipped spaces where learners can study independently. Also, efforts will be made to expand the offer of distance learning. Finally, we will also strengthen the possibilities of online registration, intake, and trajectory guidance by means of an investment for the adaptation of software packages. Early school leaving remains a challenge, especially after the COVID-19 lockdown. With a lot of distance education, young unqualified people left school early. More than ever, it is important to stimulate this group to obtain a diploma. Obtaining a secondary education diploma or a sustainable professional qualification offers young people a long-term perspective on the labor market. With EduSprong, we aim to reduce the unqualified outflow through an outreaching approach in collaboration with partner organizations, an enhancement of student counseling during the learning trajectories, and an intensive collaboration with the Examination Committee, which I already mentioned earlier. Coming to the progress and perspectives, some actions did already start, of course. A first project call was launched last summer, and all Centers for Adult Education and Centers for Basic Adult Education have developed promising projects. These projects started their work on November 1st of last year and will all be finished by August 2023. As I mentioned earlier, a region scan which analyzes the education needs locally was started in September and will soon result in 11 regional reports. The next step will be to adjust and evaluate the existing adult education offer in the region and adapt it to the results in these reports. Following actions will be coming shortly. By means of a temporary flexibilization of regulations for the organization of adult education, we aim to provide centers with the possibility to respond actively and in short term to the findings of the region scan and develop innovative projects through a second project call that will be launched shortly. Finally, as you have heard through the presentation, there's a lot of work ahead of us. I look forward to be able to present to you soon some first findings of the projects and the region scan, and to announce to you the startup of new actions as well. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Vicky. And indeed, there's a lot of work for you and the adult education team at the department. It's also quite exciting. And what is noticeable that there's quite some themes that are similar with what we actually heard from the European level and from the European adult education agenda. And that's why we have our next topic on the agenda. Our last topic is actually our panel discussion. So I would like to call all the panelists back to the screen. If you would please turn the camera on. And then there's also a new person popping up on the screen, and that's actually my colleague, Sanne Noël, who will actually lead this panel because she's a lot better than me to do this. Just to shortly introduce Sanne, Sanne is the backbone of the EU coordination at our department. Without her, there is no EU coordination. So we're very happy to have her. And she's also the head of unit of Eurodis Flanders. So who's better to go with this panel? So I'm just checking out, and Sanne, I leave it up to you.
Thank you, Wouter. That was most flattering. Welcome back to all the panelists and to all the speakers of today's session. Thank you so much for all of your presentations. I think they were all super clear and incredibly helpful to listen to. I hope all of our participants agreed. We don't have lots of time left, so I'm not going to bombard you with 1,000 questions, but I do have a couple of questions, at least one for all of you, about what you said and about the possible links between all of the presentations and all the topics. And Vicky, you were the last one to speak, and you're going to be the first one in the panel because we heard from all the different levels, the framework on European level, and then specific action plans. We also know now that there is a new European adult education agenda. And how do you think, based on what you said and also based on all of your experience, how this could prove to be an added value for all the member states, such as Flanders? I'm going to give you the floor. Thank you.
We are, of course, very positive about this resolution. The text has many links with our Flemish policy on this topic, and it's always interesting when European challenges and thus priorities go in a similar direction as those in Flanders. This gives the European policy a clear added value, and it makes it all the more relevant for us in Flanders. To give a concrete example, there are obvious parallels to be drawn between the 4 key points of our EduSprong plan and the European resolution. And then the clarification on how higher education can play a role within lifelong learning is an important question of our higher education relance actions. Just like our current policy, the resolution calls for cooperation and synergies between actors in education and employment to stimulate adult learning and lifelong learning. The Flemish government has set up the Partnership of Lifelong Learning, and this important congruence between the Flemish and European policies is strategically interesting in the context of mutual learning between us and other member states, of course. This mutual learning and sharing of practices will definitely lead to all of us getting inspired by one another. Lastly, the alignment of our priorities also means that Flemish actors in adult education can get access to European funds like Erasmus Plus or ESF Plus, which will lead to more and better initiatives in the field. Yeah.
All right, that was great. Thank you. Thank you for also making it very concrete, giving 2 examples. And also thank you for mentioning at the very end that we are very much looking forward to developing more and better initiatives. And I think that was a perfect bridge to my question for Jasmina. If we have all of these practices and initiatives that are being developed on member state level, do you have a concrete vision of how they could support this new agenda? So actually it's the same question, but then from the very different perspective.
Yeah, so from my point of view, I would first pinpoint that NEIL, amongst other several implementation instruments, also includes mutual learning as a key element. And I would say this provides also the opportunity to identify and learn from good practices in different member states. So mutual learning with the involvement of relevant stakeholders should be carried in the format of peer learning activities, peer counseling, and also exchanges of best policies and practices. It also includes conferences and other events, other types of events. So I believe best practices can benefit member states when presented, exchanged, and being integrated, taking into account specific national contexts. And in the context of the European adult learning area, the Commission facilitates a network of 36 national coordinators who promote adult learning in their countries, provide policy advice and support, and gather and disseminate best practices. They're financially compensated through Erasmus Plus program. The other activity, I would say, the Commission also supports the continuing the work of an experts group on adult education, which was warmly welcomed by member states this year. And they will closely follow the implementation of NIL, which already Klara explained before. And the third major opportunity, I would say, is EPALE as electronic platform for adult learning in Europe. So I would say there is a lot of well-established and recognized practices, so options and opportunities to gain new knowledge with sharing best practices. All this is also a necessary push to further develop adult learning and education.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that was incredibly clear. I heard you mention the working group on adult education, and I'm sorry that I'm kind of going through all these questions very quickly, but we only have a couple of minutes left. Yeah, as you mentioned this group, I think I would love to address Klara as the coordinator of this group. I think you're yeah, it's just a nice little bridge between the different topics that we're discussing at the moment. Actually, my question doesn't really have anything to do with your function in the group. However, maybe you can make a bridge yourself, and you can see links that I do not see, as I'm not an expert on this team. However, I did want to ask you, where do you think that the greatest potential for micro-credentials and individual learning accounts, both of them, lies when it comes to building the bridges between the educational field and the labor market? I'm sure this is something that you discuss very often in different groups and in different environments. So I'm very curious of hearing your thoughts on this.
Yes, thank you very much. Indeed, we think that both proposals can help to bring learning closer to everyone, including to adult learners, but not only micro-credentials are for the entire education and training system. And ILA focuses on the working age adults, normally people who finished their initial education already. But these proposals can really contribute to make lifelong learning a reality. Lifelong learning, of which we talk already for many years, for almost 20 years or even longer. But these might give really concrete support to governments to make their learning offer more flexible, sometimes even bite-sized, which are represented through micro-credentials, and make it easier for learners to take up this offer. And individual learning accounts would support learners financially, and through this enabling framework and the easy access to information, a little bit like we saw in Vicky's presentation about the EduSprong project, really making it easy to them to find out what they should learn, support them through guidance, and also reaching out to the entire education and training ecosystem in the region to offer relevant training, and also working together with companies. These are all examples which I could give, and which were also given by Vicky in a very concrete terms. But if you look at some other initiatives of the Commission, like in European Universities Initiative or the Centers of Vocational Excellence, they also work very closely together with companies to provide an offer which is the most actual and more flexible than probably a traditional provision of education and training institutions. So this flexibility, easy accessibility, and affordability, these are probably, and then everything is would be then quality assured and leads to tangible results in the forms of certificates in case of micro credentials. So we hope that these proposals will lead to stimulation of both offer and demand for learning and training. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I hear what you're saying, both on the access and the demand, offer and demand side. I mean to say, you hope to see a push through these initiatives. That makes a lot of sense. I also heard you mention that accessibility and flexibility, and of course the affordability that comes with the accessibility, are key points. This is not the first time this has been said today, and also it definitely has not been the first time it has been said overall whenever discussing this theme. But you also mentioned in this context accessibility, flexibility, but also throughout the whole learning ecosystem, which brings me to my very last question, which refers directly to the proposal for the recommendation on micro-credentials. There it is specifically recommended that the member states should deliver on the potential of micro-credentials, and we wonder actually how micro-credentials could ideally support the transition from upper secondary education or vocational education and training to tertiary education and the completion of any degree program, really. I think William is going to take this question because I see you nodding.
Thanks, Anna. Yeah, really, like I was saying during my presentation, what we wanted to achieve with the proposal was really to illustrate the potential of micro-credentials and to really kind of almost trigger or identify the differing ways in which we've seen examples of micro-credentials being used and just the potential to take them forward. And that when you're trying to facilitate, access, transfer, and progression between different levels of education and training and different types of learning experience, very often you may need to demonstrate that you have skills. You may need to complete additional credits. You may need to, if you've left school early, complete some additional learning to make minimum entry criteria or meet minimum entry requirements for a course. And that these can all be structured through micro-credentials. And that as well, we've seen examples where if, for example, persons with special learning needs may not have met language requirements, they can complete micro-credentials that can be assessed in a particular way that are designed maybe to assess their language ability, even if they have, for instance, dyslexia. So we've seen these examples of micro-credentials being used in targeted ways by, in particular higher education providers who offer access programs that can be structured, that can lead to micro-credentials and give entry into programs. And then also for people who may have not completed all of the modules or the requirements for completing a degree and may transfer to another institution, they may be given the opportunity to complete micro-credentials that will allow them to complete the program and earn the degree as well as the micro-credential. So it's just about trying to demonstrate that, the flexibility and the variety of ways in which micro-credentials can be used. We're certainly not saying that micro-credentials are the magic bullet that can fix these issues about early school leaving or access or transferability, but we hope that with the EU approach to micro-credentials that's in the proposal that we've set out, that micro-credentials will just be seen as a more tangible, useful, coherent concept that could be used in these different ways to enable transfer and completion of programs, just to help just to facilitate learners to advance in their programs and completing their studies.
Right. Thank you so much. I think I have it right when I say that you see it as an important building block, but not the only one. And I think that is something that we can all agree on. It's something that, there's a gap in the market, I suppose you could say, and it could be helped filled with micro-credentials. Wouter, I see that you have joined. Does this mean that we are running out of time and I need to give you back the floor?
I'm afraid so, Sanna. We are perfectly in time. Let me thank you, all of the speakers here, both Vicky, Jasmina, Klara, William. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sanna. But there's one speaker left, and that's actually our amazing co-organizer. Without it, it would not be possible. And that's Ute de Meijer, who is actually, since recently, also the new liaison officer at VLEVA for education as well. So thank you for joining, Ute. And Ute will explain us more about upcoming events of VLEVA. So floor is yours, Ute. And I already say bye to all the speakers and thank you for joining this EdUtalk. And Ute, please, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Wouter. So I am Ute de Meijer. I am the liaison officer at the liaison agency Flanders of Europe, or in Dutch, which is called VLEVA. I would like to thank all the speakers for the interesting presentations and also the fruitful discussions. I would also like to thank my co-organizers, the Flemish Department of Education and the representation of Flanders to the European Union. For all the attendees, the presentations and recording will be shared afterwards. You will receive an email of this. And if you want to stay informed about European policy and future events, I invite you to create an account on the website of VLEVA. The next EdUtalk will take place in the late of February, beginning of March, and will feature the team Education for Sustainable Development. I wish you all a very pleasant afternoon and already a nice weekend, and we hope to see you for future EdUtalks. Stay tuned.